What you see behind me is one of the stereotypes that is perpetuated through our culture, and that is that all Muslims are terrorists. This really stems from 9/11, and as a result of 9/11, we have seen racial profiling against Muslim Americans and Arab Americans that has negatively affected the quality of their lives. Now, this really started with the government, and what I mean by that is the Bush administration passed into law the USA Patriot Act in October of 2001 as a means of combating terrorism. And one of the aspects of the Patriot Act deals with preventative measures such as increased surveillance and detainment of suspected terrorist individuals. Section 411 of the Patriot Act allows the government to deem any group a terrorist group, even if there is no evidence. And this is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment, and therefore it's unconstitutional. And we're going to look at one case scenario. The guy you see behind me looks like a typical American, right? Because he is. He's a U.S. citizen. He used to play football at the University of Idaho. He had a wife and kids. Regular old life, right? But the thing is, once he converted to Islam, his life got a little bit different. In March of 2003, in Dulles International Airport in Washington, Abdullah al-Kid, which is what his name became, was wrongfully arrested and detained for 16 days, strip searched, left naked at night, and suffering through a lot of other humiliating circumstances. The FBI fabricated a lot of information in order to obtain the warrant for his arrest. Namely, they said that he obtained a one-way first-class ticket to Saudi Arabia. They neglected to mention that he was a U.S. citizen. They neglected to mention that the reasoning why he went to Saudi Arabia was so that he could accomplish his PhD in Islamic studies. They neglected to mention that he and his family are citizens. And the situation was a travesty, and there have been a lot of residual effects for him. His marriage fell through, and he lost his Saudi Arabian scholarship. And it took him 8 more years until he could finally rightfully be tried and get justice for this wrongful arrest. Now, let's take a look at another case scenario with TSA. So, there's an interesting article I read about this guy named Azim Khan, an American citizen who happens to be Muslim, and he describes his thought process and his feelings when it comes to going through airport security, which we already know is a big enough hassle as it is, because it takes 2 to 3 hours that you have to plan ahead of time in order to get to your flight on time, or at least for an international flight. And the way that he describes his experiences is that every time he goes through security, he gets randomly checked. Now, simply because he feels that it's not a random check and that the people administering these checks know that it's not random. And some of the quotes that he mentioned in this article are worth noting. So, talks about how he feels like because he's brown he has fewer rights, because his name is not James Williams that he has fewer rights. And this last quote is really powerful. He says, I always feel like as I'm on edge because I'm being watched at in a suspicious manner. Not because he did anything wrong, but because I'm one of 2 million Muslim Americans living in the United States in a post-9/11 era. Now let's look at some statistics to see how much racial profiling really affects people in the United States. So I thought, well, let's juxtapose the total number of Muslims impacted directly or indirectly by governmental policies regarding racial profiling, and let's juxtapose that with the number of people who actually, innocent American civilians who actually died in 9/11. And you see this wide disparity, 640,000 nearly, as opposed to 3,000. Now, the obvious question that comes up in my mind is, to what extent should the government really go to in order to ensure that every single possible area is free from potential terrorist activities? There should be a trade-off, in my opinion. And isn't America the land of the free and the home of the brave? If so, then why is one demographic of American citizens, why is that demographic living in constant fear of the government? And why are their civil liberties being taken away? There's nothing American about supporting racial profiling, because in Ferguson, Missouri, we're all up in arms about racial profiling against blacks, but when it comes to being in the airport, that's not the case. Now, I'm of the mindset of an Indian Hindu, so if I were to operate on the same racist and bigoted assumptions as the US government did, I would be even more diametrically opposed to Muslims just based on our extensive, terrible history. But I choose to stay fair-minded and progressive. And that's my message to all of you, is that do not deviate from progressive thinking and from fair-minded thinking, because that's what got America to be where it is past slavery and past all of these roadblocks. And we must hold the government accountable for trying to implement backward measures. Because if we're really the land of the free and the home of the brave, then let's prove it by being strong and not being irrationally fearful. Thank you.